Okay, class, where we are now, we're still in the central nervous system. As you recall, the central nervous system is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The last set of videos we did was on the spinal cord. So now we're going to the brain, which we call cephalization. Cephalization means going towards the head. All right. Cephalization, elaboration of the anterior portion of the CNS. That means the anterior portion of the central nervous system. See over here, this would be an embryo. This would be where the head area of the central nervous system would be developed. And this would be where the spinal cord, this would be brain area. Increasing the number of neurons in the head, highest level is reached in the human brain. Okay? All right, because we're supposed to have dominion over all the other animals. So more neurons in this brain. Okay, let's go. The brain is composed of an outer area, so we'll go here, an outer area, and that outer area is called the cortex of the brain. This outer area is called the cortex of the brain, okay? And this is composed of non-myelinated gray matter. Now this cortex is where you think from. This cortex is where you think from. So that's all. In this picture, this would be the cortex right here. Those are cell bodies, neuron cell bodies, let's say. And those neuron cell bodies, are non-myelinated, okay? And an inner core of whitish tissue, this area here, because that's where the cell body's axons would be, which would have myelination, okay? Composed of myelinated neurons. Surface anatomy includes cerebral hemispheres, which we will talk about. Cerebral hemispheres, cerebellum, which is this here, and the brainstem. Okay? Under embryonic development, so now we go back to what I had up here. Under embryonic development, this right here would be what we call a primitive streak is developing. This right here. Then if we look at that, this develops, this area becomes thickened and develops the neural plate. Now this is ectoderm doing this, ectoderm. Remember we had ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Then this starts folding in. It invaginates and starts folding in a neural groove. Right here's the neural crest. Remember that's where the neurons would develop. That would be the ones going to the peripheral nervous system, the neural crest. Actually, this is also, some of these cells migrated, if you recall, go back to your skin, they migrated away to form the melanocytes. Remember I told you the melanocytes were once part of the nervous system. So you see this neural groove as we start folding in. Okay. So here we are. We finally fold in more and more and form this neural tube. And then this neural tube separates, even though this is ectoderm, separates from the surface ectoderm. Now this tube, which is a long tube, is going to swell at the top. It's going to swell at the anterior portion. That's going to be the brain. And then narrow at the rest of it, which would have been the spinal cord. Right here. Okay? And then these somites here, over here, these develop part of the bone, but they also develop part of your muscle and everything like that. Okay, coming from mesoderm. Remember, mesoderm did connective tissue and muscle. Okay. Now, we're not going to say a whole lot. Actually, a course in embryology is a full course. Took it at Baylor undergraduate, then again in med school. So again, this is just a flavoring. This is just a flavoring to give you an idea. But right here, this long tube is what you're going to develop the brain and spinal cord from. And these cells here, neural crest, will be where the nerves, peripheral nerves, are coming off. We haven't done peripheral nerves. That's the next chapter. But just kind of giving you an idea. All right. So here would be how this goes in a progressive stage here. Embryonic development. Now, remember I told you the anterior or superior portion is going to form some swellings. So right here, this is that tube, initially, neural tube. This is the anterior, also called the rostral. This is called the caudal. Rostrum is another name for anterior. What it's going to do is start to do some enlargements. Now, the rest of it is going to do the spinal cord. These enlargements, you have three primary enlargements, are also called primary brain vesicles. The prosencephalon, the mesencephalon, and the hindbrain known as the rhombencephalon. The prosencephalon, the mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon. Now this is going to then further, as time goes on, subdivide. This one here and this one here. This will stay the same. This forms the midbrain. Okay, so during the first twin, ectoderm thickens, forming the neural plate. The neural plate and vag form the neural groove. Let's go back, just being sure we're all on the same page. So the neural groove fuses and forms the neural tube we talked about. So we got up to the neural tube, which is this. Okay, that's the pictures I showed you. Okay. Then we come with the primary brain vesicles, the first swellings, which would be these, and that's the prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombencephalon. Okay, that's the first vesicles to form. Should be these here. Now what we're going to do is they are going to subdivide into secondary brain vesicles. So the prosencephalon that you had here, is going to subdivide, make two divisions, and one will be the telencephalon and diencephalon. The telencephalon and di. The telencephalon and diencephalon were subdivisions of further foldings from the prosencephalon. Okay? This one stays the same. This doesn't do it. But then the rhombencephalon is going to come in and subdivide and make the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. And then that's going to continue into the spinal cord there. So these were the secondary vesicles which came from the primary vesicles. All right. So here again are the secondary brain. In 5 weeks, embryonic secondary brain arise from the forebrain. The forebrain being the prosencephalon. This stayed undivided, and then the rhombencephalon became the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. Further divisions of that. Okay. So right here, there we are. Now, if we look at this and we try to figure what's this going to be later in the adult brain, the telencephalon is going to form the cerebral hemispheres, the cortex, white matter, basal nuclei we'll be talking about. You will form the thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. See, epi means above, so technically we have epithalamus above. Part of that forms the pineal glands. Then we have the thalamus, which is a big area, main thing in the brain. And then the hypothalamus we've talked about before. Remember, the preoptic nuclei of the hypothalamus is where you get the temperature center. Hypothalamus, all these thalami, I call them thalami, are real important. Then the meson forms the brain stem and the midbrain. And then this guy forms the pons and the cerebellum, and that area called the medulla oblongata here coming off of that, the myelencephalon. So we'll be looking at these as we go through these few videos I'm trying to make. Okay, so that's what we have here, what you see there, okay, which is this here. Okay, so we go a little further. Now we're looking at ventricles. Ventricles are spaces within the brain. Ventricles are spaces within the brain, okay, that develop. Now, and so we're going to look at those spaces within the brain, okay, the ventricles. All right, to do that, and the ventricles are where you will get your cerebrospinal fluid, okay. So the neural crest does this, okay. So here we are. Okay, before I get to the ventricles, though, I want you to look. Remember I told you embryology is a migration and differentiation? I want you to look at how you started out like this, and the brain started folding and bending and everything. And see, the reason your brain is so folded, to be very honest, is because it needed a lot of surface area, but you didn't want to make the skull any bigger. You know what I'm saying? It needed a lot of surface area. So when and the skull is going to be hard, and the brain, of course, is soft tissue. So then the skull forced the brain to fold into these, which still gives you a lot of surface area without having a big head, should we say. Without having a big head. Okay? Alright, so we go further. So the spinal cord has two layers, outer white matter, inner gray. Remember, we just did the spinal cord. The white matter was the columns, the gray was the horns. Okay? The brain has actually three layers. The brain actually has three layers. It has a outer gray area, which is the cortex, which are cell bodies. Then the axons come down from there. The axons come down from there. They're myelinated. But then right in the middle, you have these things called the basal nuclei. The basal nuclei, which old term used to be basal ganglia, but basal nuclei, and they are cell bodies too. So it's like gray matter, then white matter, then right in the midst of that white matter are these basal nuclei we'll be talking about. Okay, and I don't know if I have a good picture of that to show you those basal nuclei. Let me do this one. Okay, yes I do. Okay, right here is the cortex. You know, like the bark of the tree, the cortex of your tree. Right here's the cortex. Okay. That's where those cell bodies that you think from come in and all that stuff. Then from those cell bodies, axons come down, myelinated. Okay? But right here, you have something called the basal, kind of the basal nuclei right up in here. See, they don't have this labeled. Good. But right in here, so that's gray matter, white, and then gray. And this area is called the basal nuclei area, which is a group of cell bodies. Okay? All right. So we go further. So here's that basic pattern there. Cortex. And here's that inner gray matter right up in here. So that inner gray matter would have been around this area here, which would have been some vesicles. So this is just to kind of show you. You can look at it. You can enlarge it and look at it. But you can see that what they're trying to show there. Okay, and I'm showing it more here in a real brain. So white matter, two layers, columns, white matter columns, and inside of the horns. But the brain has three layers: a gray, a white, and then another gray. Okay. We did the meninges. But we'll do it again here. They're a little more detailed in the brain area. Okay. So we'll do it again here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start another video and do brain meninges.